Sitting somewhere up in the top of New York with RCA, where I've been having a look at the RCA VideoDisc system. As a writer about VideoDiscs, I'm one of the many journalists who've been responsible for saying all sorts of things about RCA's VideoDisc and a lot of other people's VideoDiscs. Some of them conclusions that we've had to draw on the basis of only a limited amount of information. I've now got RCA VideoDisc technology coming out of my ears here, and it's quite obvious that only a tenth of the picture has been seen by the outside world, and for obvious reasons. But at last we're now getting some really hard information coming out of RCA, because they're now ready to talk about it much more freely. And so as a start, the Vice President of RCA's Selector Vision VideoDisc project, Dick Sonnenfeldt, is sitting next to me. Dick, can you just first of all quickly go through a thumbnail sketch of the technical changes that the RCA VideoDisc system has gone through in its development?
John, I'd be very happy to do that. Specifically, you're on the 49th floor of the RCA building in a demonstration facility that has been here since 1975. And privately, we've shown a great many people the things I'm going to show you today. Very happy to have you here and give you an update.
I had a good lunch as well, by the way.
I hope you enjoyed it very much.
But that I'm still remain objective.
I hope before we get through, you'll have RCA VideoDisc not only coming out of your ears, but into your eyes as well.
Yeah.
You may recall that the RCA VideoDisc system uses a method of detection called the capacitance method of detection. And it is a sensing method which does not require physical contact between the stylus and the disc, so it works quite differently from a phonograph disc. And it's a proximity sensing method, and originally the RCA disc was a coated disc. I'm holding up one of the early discs, vintage about 2 or 3 years ago, that actually had 3 coatings of metal, a coating of dielectric, and a lubricant coating on each side. But I might add, even these discs could hold up to an hour of video and audio material on a side, 2 hours in total. By the way, they're grooved discs, approximately 9,500 grooves to the inch. I'm going to put this disc down because it's ancient history. We no longer have coated discs.
You mentioned to me before you put it down that these holes were also finger holes.
They were finger holes to facilitate the handling of discs, and as you'll see, we've come up with a much better idea that doesn't require finger holes in the disc. In fact, it makes the handling a new convenience. The RCA disc today is an all-plastic disc. You may be able to see some rainbow-like pattern. That's the diffraction of the light in this room due to the groove and signal structure in the disc. The disc is made of PVC. It's a polyvinyl chloride disc, and it has a constituent of carbon, which is highly conductive at the frequencies which are used to reconstitute the video picture. Some of those frequencies, by the way, go up to 1,000 megahertz. At ordinary frequencies or direct current, this disc, in effect, would be a perfect insulator, or a near-perfect insulator. It does all of the same things that the coated disc used to do. In fact, the disc can still be played interchangeably on the same player with the same pickup. The advantage of this disc is it is much easier to make. It is made like an audio disc in essentially a standard audio record press. Both sides are stamped out at the same time in about 20 seconds, and the disc is sprayed with a special silicone and open air, and that's all there is to its manufacture.
And there's no dielectric coating over it any longer?
No, there's no dielectric coating, because the combination of PVC and carbon gives you the dielectric action that we had to achieve before in a coating. Now, actually,
before you get to that, so the significant thing that has happened since that last disc is you've moved now to a new situation where you've got a much simpler disc that can be produced on standard audio record pressing equipment.
And in a standard audio plant. When I say standard, or when you say standard audio equipment, it's with some minor changing in the tooling, and I'm not implying that the same press would be used interchangeably for audio and video disc, but it is an audio record press with minor modifications. By the way, it can use the same steam plant.
Yeah.
Now, I'm holding up this disc. Actually, the consumer will not handle this disc. The disc will come in a package called a caddy. It's extracted from this caddy automatically in the player. It's, and I will show you this later, it's simply done by pushing the disc into a slot in the player. In the act of pulling out the jacket, the disc is left behind in the player and it's automatically dropped on the turntable and it is played. When you're finished playing it, you can reinsert the jacket into the player and retrieve the disc. This has many, many advantages. One is complete protection of the disc against warpage, which is an important factor, spillage, and by the way, you need no other package for the disc.
Can I interrupt you there? The warpage is an important factor not only with your system but with any video.
Any video disc, whether optical, capacitance, or pressure pickup,
yes,
is much more sensitive to warpage than an audio disc, and a video disc package has to protect a disc against external forces because these discs are plastic.
So it's not just a technical requirement, it's also a packaging requirement.
Well, it's a packaging requirement, and one very important when you ship or inventory the disc or handle it in trucks. By the way, when you make up a package for a video disc, it either has to be so strong that normal forces do not get transmitted to the disc, or it must have so much room in it that even if it is bent slightly, the forces don't get to the disc. This package is both strong and it has some room inside for the disc. By the way, this may be a little difficult to see on our camera, but you can see a disc here which is sort of half in and half out of the sleeve. You notice there's a side marker that goes with the disc, and interestingly enough, it stays with the disc, not the sleeve, so you don't have to worry which way around you put that in the player.
Showing side 1 or side 2.
Side 1 or side 2. In fact, as I'll show you a little later, this then also gives us the opportunity to put some very simple detection circuitry in the player, which detects automatically which side of the disc you're playing, just in case you've forgotten.
Can you now show us how the system works in the player and actually give us a simple demonstration of it? But before we get to that, some of the technical decisions that you've made regarding the disc, one of the things I've discovered in talking to you, which I didn't know before and which I think a lot of people in the industry didn't know before, is that some of the facilities you don't have on the disc, such as freeze frame, slow motion and fast motion, and access of specific frames, I understand from what you've said that this is technically possible. The reason that you haven't built this into the RCA selector vision system are really marketing decisions. Can you sort of...
John, in fact, the capabilities for doing these particular features, and specifically freeze frame, slow motion, fast motion, they are in the disc in that the successive frames and grooves on the disc are coded. It's a question of the investment that you want to make in the hardware in the player.
Yes.
We're not at all sure that the consumer is willing to pay anything for these extra features. So the first models that RCA will market will not have freeze frame nor slow motion. By the way, they have some very attractive features that you can't get on other systems, one being rapid search, which allows you to go from any part of the disc to any other part of the disc at a speed of your own choosing and with the audio on, and as you'll see, there's no loss of picture. It comes back instantaneously, so you can pick by the picture and the sound where you are. And by the way, you can also repeat play any segment with the audio on.
Yes, you don't lose the audio. That's
you do not lose the audio, and as you'll see, the repeat play does not involve any waiting at all. Between the end and the beginning of the sequence. But you're absolutely right. The decision not to offer these features at this particular time, or when we go to market, is a marketing decision, not a technical decision.
Yes, I think that's important, because one of the things that has often been said of the RCA system is because there are 4 frames to 1 groove, that prevented one from actually accessing a single groove. But in fact you can do that, and in the average moving picture, 4 frames would be virtually like a still picture, but you just have decided not to bother to build it into the first player.
That's correct. The capability is there, and by the way, I'd like to give you an interesting statistic. In a laboratory model which was built to illustrate the feasibility of these features, we've played a single groove as many as 300,000 times without any wearing of the groove with a stylus, And by the way, you shouldn't conclude from that that our disc will play 300,000 times.
No.
The groove and the stylus get mated, but these discs will play many hundreds of times. But in a mode of freeze frame or slow motion, you will get admirably satisfactory life.
Yeah. One other little statistic is I understand that if you unraveled one groove, it would be 12 miles long.
Yes, you know, we had a little argument this morning whether it's 12 or 13 miles, and I looked it up. It's very close to 13 miles, about 12.7 miles. It's a long way.
I see. Before we actually get on to a demonstration of the player, can you explain what the situation is at the moment right now in regard to RCA's plans about marketing the player?
I will. Before I do that,
Yes.
let me comment
Yes.
on another aspect
Yes.
of the disc, which is not as visible as the change from a coated to an uncoated disc.
Uncoated. Yes.
Uncoated,
Yes.
non-coated.
Yes. I
disc.
thought you said uncoated. Yes. Yes.
An uncoated
Right.
disc. And that is the change that we have achieved in mastering these discs. This particular coated disc, which is about 3 years old, was mastered by exposure from an electron beam, and then subsequent development of a chemical layer known as a photoresist. It's essentially a photographic process which, through development, achieves the structure in the disc. And by the way, there's a certain similarity between the electron beam mastering and the photoelectric mastering, which is being used by other manufacturers.
Yes.
We started approximately 5 years ago to develop electromechanical mastering of these discs. And by the way, the discs that we will play for you, as the disc in here and all of our discs today, are made electromechanically by cutting directly into a copper master with a diamond stylus that is driven with a piezoelectric crystal at frequencies of many, many megahertz. There's no chemical development involved, and by the way, we did this for several reasons. One is the great simplicity of the method. It completely eliminates the need for clean rooms, but most important, we have achieved an improvement in defect level of these masters of approximately 30 to 1.
Yeah.
So that is not visible, but it is another aspect of getting video discs to the point where they will fit into ordinary record factories with the least upset.
Right. You also mentioned a point. We had originally on this very hasty script here that was the quickest script that's ever been written, a plan to handle one of the discs. I wonder if we could do it now, if we're going to demonstrate that disc, because one of the erroneous ideas that's got around about the RCA system, and certainly a thing that I thought was that the reason it's in a sleeve is because if the disc gets handled, the picture quality is impaired. But in fact, you've demonstrated to me earlier today that this is not the case, and it's a matter of keeping
It most
rigid.
certainly is not the case. In fact, one of the features of this particular package is that it's locked. You can't get the disc out until it gets in the player, unless you have 3 hands.
Right.
So I'm going to have to ask for a little help to get this disc out of the caddy.
I'm also going to be the umpire to make sure that even if we have to do a cutaway, that it's going to be the same disc that goes on the player.
Absolutely. We have a disc here which
He did with 3 hands.
unseen assistant
Yes.
removed from its package was 3 hands, and
He's very interesting 3-handed man.
Jim, I guess it's all right to let John fingerprint this disc.
Yes, okay, all right. I can do it wherever I like.
Whatever
Is
you
that right?
want.
Yeah, I'm doing it on both sides, just in case they switch it over without me.
By all means.
Okay.
For good measure, I think we'll take the disc out completely, and if our cameraman can do this, I will throw it on the floor on both sides.
Yes, he's going to be a very good cameraman if he picks it up. But, oh, no, he's doing well.
In fact, I'll deliberately throw it over one of these cords, and if you can capture it, I'm going to turn it over and do this all over again.
He's not going to jump on it, but...
And now I'm going to take the disc and get it back in its package. You notice it's locked, and John, you keep us honest. We'll play it for you later.
Yes, I'm watching you all the time.
You can memorize the number.
Side 1 only. It's the hit of the week.
All right, shall we look at one of these players?
Yes, that's right. please do.
Explain that this player is a prototype. It's representative of several hundred players that we have built for complete testing of the system, which, by the way, has involved the pallet manufacture of approximately 250,000 discs. And this is to assure ourselves that the system will really work, that it be reliable, that it can be serviced infrequently in a consumer's home, that the picture quality will be superb, and so on. However, I want to tell you that this particular player physically is not representative of the product that we will introduce to the market, and a little later we'll give you a glimpse at a prototype which may not be precisely what we'll introduce to the market, but very, very close, and certainly representative in picture quality. Now, in order to put the disc in the player, I'm going to take the package, the caddy, and put it into a slot in the player, push it all the way in, and I hope you can catch on the monitor that a green light went on. I'm going to push the play button on the player, and I'm going to pick a place on this disc.
There's a marker there showing how that scale shows where you are on the disc.
By the way, you realize that the picture quality which you see on this tape is not the same picture quality which you see on the receiver, and you may want to comment on it. It has to do with the transfer from a TV receiver under bad lighting conditions to a tape.
I think all of our audience are well informed enough to realize that.
Now, what I'd like to do next is to show you the active search feature that I commented on briefly before. By pushing the active search button, I can scan this disc, and I'm doing this now. I'm going forward on the disc, and I'm just pretending that I went too far. I'm going to go back over some of the things that you may recognize as having seen previously. Now, you notice that when I searched that disc, the picture stayed in synchronism, the sound never disappeared. And when I stopped, it stopped instantaneously. By the way, this particular disc, John, is a demonstration disc, and I'm going to go forward. It's a street scene from Tokyo. What I'm going to do next is take you into some movies. Some of you may recognize this as a late vintage thriller. I'm just going through this movie at a very high speed, and by the way, I'm now into a scene from MASH, and in just a second here I will pick one of my favorite scenes, which I've found without any trouble at all.
I have noticed that RCA have a preponderance for picking out the nude sequence in MASH. I don't know what
if we wait just a minute, I think you'll see that I pretty well landed on that scene.
I hope I haven't stolen your thunder by saying it's the nude sequence. But
well, let me see whether I can do it. If I were more familiar with the movie, I could get there quicker, by the way. That's not a limitation of the equipment. There we are. By the way, when I take my hand off the search knob, the player with the green light on is automatically in the repeat play mode. And if you'll watch this picture very carefully, this picture will now repeat a sequence that's approximately 12 seconds long with the audio on. The transition is so smooth from the end to the beginning of the scene that you really have to pay attention to the program material. You'll notice that the loss of synchronization, which is so typical of such things usually, is totally absent here.
And I believe you can do up to 30 seconds.
Well, it is technically possible. Again, I have to say it's a marketing decision that has not yet been made, whether that length will be variable and exactly how long it'll be. Yeah. By the way, let me just, for sake of illustration, I'm going forward And I'm now into Sleuth, a section from Sleuth. I'm going to run through that movie, and by the way, it's not the whole movie, just an excerpt. I think you will recognize that as
yes.
one of our more recent favorites.
Incidentally, I should say while this is playing that I had a demonstration of the stereo sound capability earlier this morning, and it really was fantastically good. I was very impressed by it.
I'm sorry that we're unable to replicate the stereo performance on the U-matic tape, but it is superb. I think it stands up very well. Now, if you're more martially inclined, just for sake of illustration, I think you'll all recognize this as a scene from Patton, and in this particular case, I'm going to watch it and let it play normally instead of repeat. Now, possibly I've gotten tired of this particular disc or decided to look at something else, and what I want to do is reject or recycle this particular disc and take it back out of the player. And by the way, it's done exactly in the same way as was the original insertion of the disc. It's done by reinserting the empty sleeve in the disc and retrieving the disc. And by the way, you should be able to see that the green light, which was on before, I put it on again for you, is now out. The disc is out. If you look carefully, you can see that the disc and its carrier are back in here. Just for sake of illustration, I will put the disc in the player once more and show you the empty sleeve.
I was wondering, could we not put in the other disc now, the one that I handled?
We will in just 1 second.
Okay.
I think we'll probably...
I'm watching that other disc, Delegate, so I have your interest.
You keep your eye on it. I assume you can see that the green light is on. That means the disc is in the player, and indeed, when I look at the caddy, you can see it's empty. I'm going to remove the disc, and it's back in the caddy.
Good.
Now, John, I think what we'd like to do is to play for you the disc that you fingerprinted and that I threw on the floor. And by the way, we'd like to do it on a player that we can open up, because another thing is I'm going to let you touch the disc while it's actually spinning, which I think is a very convincing demonstration of its strength. So, John, I hope your audience realizes that this is all quite unrehearsed and impromptu, but you're a marvelous director.
After a good lunch as well. I mean, it's a feat of concentration.
I should explain that we've removed the top from this player, and normally the player would not play with the top off. You may notice there's a screwdriver that activates a little switch, the interlock, which would normally prevent it from playing. Now I'm going to take the caddy.
This is my disc, isn't it? This is the one
that is your disc, and as a matter of fact, I'd like you to come over here and take a look at your fingerprints on the disc, because they're right there. I can see them. Yes, I
can see them. I recognize the whorls on them.
And what I'm going to do is turn this player on. And by the way, you were nice enough to fingerprint it all over, so I don't have to worry too much about where I'm going to play. I hope, Steve, you can pick up the TV picture. By the way, I should explain that the RCA disc has a remarkable property that it will, even if there were any damage, it would clean up on repeated play with the stylus running through the groove. John, I'm going to get you to come over here while the disc is spinning, and I'm going to encourage you to put your finger on it while it's spinning, which is a particularly brutal form of treatment. And by the way, you can do it and watch it slow down enough, you'll lose color sync, and the picture may even disappear.
Well, while this picture is running, I am now actually going to put my finger on the disc and slow it down and do all sorts of nasty, horrible things. There, you can see it happening. That's being done by running my fingers over the disc to slow it down. Now, I've removed them and it's steadying back again.
John, I'd say you've improved this disc slightly.
Yes.
We ought to see more of you. My point is that these discs are very, very tolerant of this type of handling. And as I mentioned before, the real problem with video discs is not fingerprints and minor scratches and abrasion. It's the warpage problem, which we think we have completely under control with this package.
Yes.
Which I hope you'll recognize also as being one that's very convenient. Let me stop the player, and John, maybe I can get you to take this disc out. Have you handled one of these?
Well, the actual caddy?
Yes. I think you did it once before today.
But what with my three hands? You're not asking me to take it out, because I can't do that.
I am asking you to remove the disc from the player, which you should be able to do by...
This is what they called this morning the idiot-proof test. Are we on me? Yes, we are, right? Here we go.
If you watch everything, you should be able to see the disc going out of the player. And I don't know whether your audience...
Some people would say if I can do it, anybody can. Right. Yes, and it's got side one on it still, and it's still got this writing side one only.
Seriously speaking, though, if you can't do it after one trial, I don't think we've done our job of designing it for the consumer.
No, that's true.
And that was really our ambition.
Finally, Dick, I think you're going to just show us the box with the innards basically in the very approximate form that the final player may appear in, which is a vastly different box from the one we've been looking at.
Again, I want to stress what you've looked at is a test bed, which we've used to prove out the system. It has all the features that the final product we have.
Right, during the interim, we've changed over performers. We've now got Jim Givings, the man with three hands, who's now going to just explain this new box of tricks, which is really basically the same player, but how it may look in the final version.
Well, John, I think you can readily see that this player is about half the size of the older players that we've been using up until now. It is half the weight. As a matter of fact, this player weighs less than 20 pounds, and it consumes less than half the power that the older player, or somewhere under 25 watts altogether. Now, this is a styling model. Over here, John, we have what is the insides of the older type of player. This has over 2,145 parts in it. And I want to contrast this with the what is required to make the new player we've just been looking at work. And this is it over here. This is a plastic a mechanical model of the player. And what we have done in order to reduce the parts count, which incidentally in this player is less than 700 parts total, and that includes every nut, screw, bolt, and washer that's required to assemble the player, is to do two things. In the electronics area, we have gone to integrated circuits. There are 7 of them in the player, which of course has made it possible to greatly compress the real estate required for the electronic components. 3 of the integrated circuits are off the shelf and 4 are custom circuits. Now, they are represented, I don't know whether you can see this in the picture, by these little black cans here. And incidentally, John, that's an exact count of all the electronic parts required to make this player operate.
Could I just interrupt you there, Jim? On this basis, I understand that the whole circuitry now of the new player is much simpler, and from a servicing point of view, which is quite important in the UK, for example, with TV rental companies interested in the video disc player, that the circuitry of it now is very, very simple indeed.
John, that's a very good point, because of course with all solid state components and integrated circuits, servicing requirements should be an absolute minimum, but when servicing is required, the player is constructed in such a way that the circuit board, which forms the bottom pan of the player, can be removed by the serviceman, because there's only one connection from it to the rest of the player, and that's a multi-conductor cable here. And you can take that board out and set it alongside the player and use the player in its normal fashion as the service technician services and troubleshoots the circuit board. So we believe that that will be a great assistance to simplifying any servicing requirements for this particular player.
Could you show us a caddy being inserted?
Yes, let's do that right now, John. We'll take a caddy once again and insert it into the player, drop the disc on the turntable, which of course automatically starts the motor drive. And I want to show you a particular feature that the caddy has enabled us to accomplish. in greatly simplifying the mechanical side of this player, because I've just moved the arm down to roughly half the way through the side of the disc, and I'm going to now change the disc, and notice what happens when I reinsert the caddy into the player. It pushes the arm back to a positive reference position in the back of the player so that
Well, thanks very much, Jim. I would stress again, as RCA have kept on stressing to me, that the final product that appears may look slightly different, but basically it's quite a quantum leap from the other box in the corner there, the room which we saw, which is much bigger and much more complicated circuitry. I'm going to try and wrap it up now and wind it up there, and thank RCA for the terrific help and facilities that they've given in producing this program. Program is perhaps a misnomer, because I should point out that none of the people here are television program makers, all engineers and businessmen, and amateur presenters like myself as well. And if some of the focusing seemed a bit off, that's because we really went into this without any preparation whatsoever, but we thought you'd like to see something of the RCA VideoDisc player rather than nothing at all. And if sometimes you thought the image quality of the playback on the television screen was a bit soft, with the greatest respect and hope he doesn't get annoyed with me, it was the focus pulling on the television camera and not the inadequacies of the VideoDisc system. Thanks very much, Dick Sonnenfeldt and others at RCA.
And John, we want to thank you very much for giving us this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.
John, since the filming of your great production, I've had an opportunity to review it, and I realized that, I hope you can see this, that you asked me a question regarding marketing of the RCA VideoDisc, and I answered it by telling you at length about mastering. I guess I was impressed with the fact that you have to master a disc before you can market it. And while you're winging your way south, presumably to look at Brand X, let me add, if I may, a few comments about marketing. And what I'd like to do first is read from the official RCA news release dated January the 9th, 1979, which says under a headline, RCA to enter the video disc market with new low-cost consumer product. Quote, President E.H. Griffiths says RCA to proceed with maximum speed to ready product for market introduction in United States. Now, with respect to marketing, there are always the questions of where, when, and how much. I think the where has been answered by saying in the United States. I doubt that we will have additional information for quite some time. Mr. Griffiths also said that a time schedule for product introduction, together with a marketing concept aimed ultimately at full national distribution, will be announced later this year meaning 1979. Mr. Griffiths said that the video disc has been given the highest priority at RCA. Another aspect of marketing is voluminous market research that we've done over the years, and Mr. Griffiths said, quote, our market research indicates that the video disc will become a multi-billion-dollar business in the 1980s. By the way, I'm personally very familiar with that market research, which has been done over a period of 5 years by 8 different people, and it's remarkably consistent in what it tells us. Now, we have given out certain information with respect to RCA's product costs, and this really was done by identifying the goals which were set for the development of this product. And they were, first, the development of a video disc player that could be sold at retail for $400 or less, and let me add, with a normal profit for RCA and everyone in the distribution chain, and at the time of its introduction. And secondly, you've seen that, the development of an uncoated disc with 1 hour of programming per side, or a total of 2 hours per disc, and pricing. That would be $15 or so on average for a full-length feature movie, and perhaps $10 or less for some other programs. And finally, the availability of adequate software or programming to support the introduction of a video disc system and sustain it in the marketplace. Clearly, the only reason to purchase a video disc player would be the existence and the attraction of a catalog that has in it programs that you want. You have to remember that RCA is a leading manufacturer and marketeer of consumer electronics. And in looking at the video disc player and the video disc, RCA is looking at a mass consumer market, which is really the area of its greatest interest and success. And we have done everything in terms of pricing, performance, and in the introduction plans that are being worked on to make sure that this will be a mass consumer product. And I simply want to assure you that once RCA introduces this product to the market, it will be done with full vigor, looking to an early and rapid expansion to full national marketing, total service support, and the ability to serve the U.S. consumer with an outstanding catalog of quality programs. John, I hope that this little PS has given your audience and you some of the information on marketing that you asked for, which I neglected to do in the interview. Godspeed and good luck, and it's been a pleasure working with you. Thank you.